it's a real honor to be part of IMDb. I'm actually the founder and CEO of IMDb. And to think a kid growing up in Manchester in the north of England is here to introduce a panel like this for today I'm so honored to be here to do that. Now, this is to introduce you to the, get this, right, IMDb Pro and Amazon MGM Studios. Like, Amazon, like, there are some people who work for IMDb here and work for Amazon as well, but can I just say those words again? Amazon MGM Studios. Like, oh my goodness, right, okay. The film nerd in me is kind of geeking out at this, but it's my pleasure to introduce you to the intentionally intersectional panel at the Acura House of Energy. Is this a House of Energy? Yes, great stuff. There's plenty of energy here, and the event's part of our ongoing work between IMDb, between Prime Video, between IMDb Pro, to advance the authentic and inclusive representation within the entertainment industry. And we still have a way to go, don't we? But we're going to learn some things from the panelists today. I will now introduce Latasha Gillespie, who is Global Head of Diversity, Equity, Inclusion, and Accessibility for Amazon MGM Studios, for Prime Video, for Freebie, and obviously a great partner with us for the things that we do at IMDb as well. So, Latasha, over to you, and let's go.
Thank you, Carl. Give it up for the entire team, Carl, Casey, and the entire team at IMDb Pro. How many of you were here last year? Awesome. Like, these digs are amazing, right? Can we give it up for Acura? Listen, I know where I'm going to be the entire festival. You can just find me moseying around here. This space is beautiful, so we are grateful to be here. So those of you who were here last year, you already know I got a firehouse panel, and I added more fire to the panel this year. Those of you who were not here last year, buckle up, because you're going to go on a special ride today with some of my most amazing friends. And so I'm glad to introduce all of them. To my direct right, we have Andrea Wilson-Mirza, who's the director of Reframe. Next, we have Nick Nowicki, who's the founder of the Easter Seals Disability Film Challenge. Our additional fire we've added to the panel this year is none other than Lupika Shah, the actor and co-founder of 1497. Last but not least, he is my spiritual twin. That's why they had to separate us. It's too much energy to sit together. He is the director of transgender representation at GLAAD. Give it up for Alex Schmeider. I love that we're talking about intersectionality today, because all of us in this room, we are, complicated people. We wear multiple layers of identity. We're not just one thing, right? So some of us are parents, how we identify as a gender, our religion, our race, our ethnicity, how we show up in the world is very layered. So I'm glad that we're having this conversation today, because I think, the more we dive into that and explore that and embrace that, the better stories we tell, right? Because no one group of people is a monolith. So I love this. So my first question to all of you is, actually, I want to start with something really positive. Let's talk about what's something that you're super proud of to date, that you've been able to see that has an intersectional creator or crew or made a difference in the story itself. And I'm going to start with you, Alex, and work my way back.
Well, thank you so much for having me again on this stage. And I'm so just excited to talk about this topic, particularly with all the folks on this stage. The proudest thing I think I've done to date in terms of this topic is I was a producer on the film Disclosure, which premiered at Sundance in 2020, about the history of trans representation on in TV and film. And when we were crewing up, thanks to the leadership of director Sam Fader, producer Amy Shoulder, and of course, Laverne Cox, the one and only, we were very intentional about the way that we put people in positions of power behind the scenes so that the representation on screen was mirrored behind the scenes, to empower not only those on screen to be able to share their truths and show up as their most authentic selves, but also that created an environment that people felt more free to share and be vulnerable and honest. So that, I would say, leading that fellowship program was probably one of my proudest moments to date, and the film itself, I think, is pretty good.
Awesome. Thank you for sharing that. And Lupika, what's something either you've been a part of or even just something you've enjoyed watching that you were really, really proud of the intersectionality representation that you saw either in front or behind the camera?
Yeah. Well, I'm not necessarily camera, but with 1497 itself, we founded it in 2020, so we're still relatively new, but our whole purpose was to expand the definition of who a South Asian artist can be, what stories they can tell. And right now, because I have it on the brain, I am just so incredibly proud of the South Asian Lodge that we built last year and the panels and conversations that we had there, because it really, I think, was a broad range of topics and people that we brought together that you don't often see in a quote-unquote South Asian space, because, like, what is that really? There is no one way for that to be defined. So I'm really proud, and I hope everyone can come visit our lodge this year.
Nick?
Hey, so I am the founder and director of the Easter Seals Disability Film Challenge, and I've been very lucky in my career that I've been in over 40 TV shows and movies, but the majority of my work has been self-driven, with me writing and producing and creating my own content. And I looked around 11 years ago and I was like, why aren't more people with disabilities creating their own content? Mm-hmm. So I created the Easter Seals Disability Film Challenge to help other people take their career in their own hands. So in terms of intersectionality, what I'm most proud of is the 600 films that have been created around the world. And, when we talk about intersectionality, disability intersects amongst all other minority populations. Yeah, and so one last piece of excitement, would be a little movie that came out this year called Spider-Man Across the Spider-Verse. Yes. So, that has its own intersectionality on multiple layers. I play a little role in that too. I play Lego Spider-Man. Yeah. It's a small role, pun intended. No, but what I'm very excited about is Danielle Perez, who's a longtime Film Challenge participant and a very talented actor and comedian. She ended up playing Sun Spider and was spotted from the Film Challenge. And so when we talk about intersectionality, she is a woman of color. She's Latinx. She's a wheelchair user. She identifies as being LGBTQ+. So she intersects amongst everything, right there. So, that's really, when we talk about it, that's the way forward. It's about talent and just including people.
That's right. Her talent is what showed up. I love that. All right. Last but not least, Andrea.
It's my turn?
It is.
Because I'm next to my fellow data nerd, I'll say one research-related thing that I'm very proud of in the work that we do at Reframe, which Reframe is a collaboration between WIF, or in addition to my work with Reframe. And this past year, I had the privilege of producing a documentary which showcases survivors of intimate partner violence and a nonprofit in LA that provides them with living wage employment. And for that project, we had the opportunity to create an all-survivor team behind the camera.
Oh, wow.
Which was an incredible process, allowed us to work with partners like Hire Survivors Hollywood and others. And it's
there's always these reminders. You know, it's like once you open the door in this work and start breaking down the many intersections that we all live with, you can find more ways to be a champion, right? And more communities to serve.
I love that too, because I think oftentimes when we think about intersectionality, we think about, you know, those visible demographics, right? And we know we have hidden disabilities, but we also know part of that identity can be survivors as well. So
Absolutely, absolutely. And in this business, I think it's so important to speak up about, you know, these issues that have outsized impact to us.
Well, listen, you brought it up. I was going to, you know, not. But since you brought up, you know, being a data nerd, I hear that you have a new report that's coming out.
We do, yeah.
So, I mean, we're just among friends here. So
Yeah,
I'm just, you know,
I'm just among friends and cameras,
just among
you know?
friends and cameras. Don't even worry about those cameras. That's just to make sure, you know, we you know, it's not going anywhere, I promise. But, you know, we're interested in, because the one thing I know for sure is the work that you do in research and the data that comes out of it is really impactful to help us understand not just what's happening in terms of diversity for diversity's sake, but also what's happening in terms of the bottom line and box office sales, which really should be informing the decisions we all make if we are fortunate enough to sit in those executive seats in terms of choices we make. So, you know, is there just a little bit you can share with us? You know, maybe some good news and then also maybe some things we should be paying attention to?
Yeah, absolutely. You know, I think there's when we read the trades and we see what comes out about research, about representation in the industry, like, I think probably many people in this room have had that experience of like, ugh, really? Like, still, the numbers aren't moving, you know? And it feels frustrating, and we all feel that frustration together. We have a new report that's coming out next month that breaks down the top 100 films of last year, of 2023, and it looks at who was hired in so many different roles across these films.
How do you define top 100?
Great question. So we have a top 100 most popular list, which we actually develop with our partners at IMDb Pro. So that's about what people are watching. It includes streaming, as well as traditional theatrical, as well as, you know, any kind of hybrid release model that's happening these days. So on the list for this year, I think there's about 15 straight to streaming releases that were so popular that even though they didn't do a theatrical release, they still made the list. And I think that's really important because when we look at the top 100 grossing at the box office, that's where we're really not seeing the numbers shift. You know, we're seeing about 29 of those films for this coming year qualify for the reframe stamp. So that demonstrates that they have a commitment to gender balanced hiring by hiring women of color in key roles, key decision-making roles. But in the streaming space, we are seeing more growth. So those features that are released straight to streaming versus the traditional theatrical release, we are seeing higher numbers, more hires for women of color, for example. And, you know, we can talk about this all day, but it definitely correlates to budget and this idea of risk and investment, which is like our big fight, you know, that we just keep having to prove over and over again that this is worth spending the money on because it can earn money for many, many people.
Absolutely.
You know?
I think what your last report really pointed out for me was the chicken and the egg situation. So a lot of people say, well, you have to have a big name star for the film to make a lot of money. But what happens is it's really statistically, when you had your PhDs look at it, statistically, it was really the budgets for production, for marketing, right? But what happens is a big name star usually gets higher budgets for production and marketing, but really you could put an up-and-coming star in those films with the same level of support and still see great success at the box office.
Absolutely.
Don't email and at me, it's in the data.
It's in the data. Well, and the other thing the data shows is that the people most likely to hire people that represent more diverse experiences, more representative of our actual population, are people from marginalized groups. So when you have a director who is a woman of color, a director who is a trans person of any gender, they are more likely to fill the other seats on their team with people of shared experience. What we're not seeing is cross-cultural and cross-gender solidarity in terms of people stepping up and hiring and creating that space. It's like the pressure is still being put on the most marginalized to do the most for our own communities. And I think we're not really gonna see those numbers meaningfully change until that solidarity really shows up in the hiring.
Come on, where my allies at? Yeah, we need all the allies. And everyone can be an ally for another community. Just because you wear a marginalized identity doesn't mean you can't be an ally for another community. So we all have to do that. I love that. And Nick, speaking of being allies and making sure that we are being intentional about that, I know that the Easter Seals has been doing a lot of work to also bring more visibility to people with cognitive disabilities. Mm-hmm. Yeah, you want to talk about that?
Sure. So, when we talk about the word disability, this is something that everyone needs to understand. 1 in 4 Americans has a disability. So that's 61 million Americans. That is the largest minority population in the country, and that translates worldwide. So right away, me as a little person, you see the stool. You see me get up, you see me walking, you understand what my disability is. Well, the vast majority of disabilities are invisible. And so we are so honored and excited that so many people through the Film Challenge have been able to not only make films, tell a story, and be spotlighted, but also to disclose their disability on their terms authentically, because that's something else. A lot of times in film, we're seeing more and more representation of people with disabilities, but I think the way moving forward, how we get that done authentically, is having the community be a part of telling that story, not only in front of the camera, but behind the camera. Be in that writer's room, be a director, and you're gonna see something that hasn't been seen before. And so we've been really honored and excited that that's been happening and people have been able to tell their stories.
I love that. How many of you are using the IMDb Pro tool where you can do the self-identification? How many of you have had a chance to do that? Okay, great. So by the end of this afternoon, I want everyone to be able to raise your hand and say you've gone in and used the tool. It is a great way for studios, for networks, for independent film producers, for people to find you, people with your talent, your skill sets, and also it helps them be proactive in building a very diverse and inclusive production set. So, and Alex, you were really helpful in helping us put that together. And you were really instrumental, and I can't thank GLAAD enough for helping us be very intentional and nuanced and diligent in terms of how we allowed our trans community to identify in the tool. And so I really want to talk to you a little bit about for those who are not in the trans community, can you help people understand why it's important, or we know why it's important, but help us understand the nuances around properly being able to identify?
Well, it was an absolute privilege and a joy of collaboration to work with the team at IMDb Pro, specifically Jenny, on developing the feature so that people can self-identify on the platform and do so in a way that they can most authentically express themselves in both a safe way and a way that they can be found when they want to be found. And I think, as Nick was sort of talking about with the disability community, within the trans community, there are those of us who are trans who are not perceived as trans in the world, whatever that means. There are those of us who are, and so it's so important to have agency over the way that we do show up, wherever we show up. And one of the things that I'm most proud of that IMDb Pro was able to do, and this was years-long process, was ensuring that trans people on IMDb Pro are able to now be credited under the name that they use and not lose their entire credit history while being unintentionally outed if they went by another name. And so it was incredibly challenging and nuanced to think through the ways that our community could best be served and also to be served by the entertainment industry. So I should have started with that. That is also one of the most proudest projects that I've had the opportunity to work with at GLAAD, and it's a testament to collaboration. We were talking about the entertainment industry. We need allies. IMDb Pro has been such a spectacular ally in the launch of this feature, and I hope so many more people among our communities go on there, put your information so that when that searchability function is really being used to the extent that it will have so much influence and power, there are people to be found, and we will be able to staff up in the ways that Andrea is speaking to, will change the landscape of the stories that we're seeing and telling.
And I think, give it up for that. And just so you know, we're not paid up here to do a commercial.
No.
But we do think this work is important because I love what you said about the safe way, because we also want people to be able to, the thing the tool does is it allows you to be found how you want to be found or not. Right, but still allows us to make sure that when we're looking at the people who worked on films, we can accurately, aggregately report, the diversity makeup of those films. And so it was really, really important work. And I love the fact that, IMDb Pro and IMDb team is not afraid to, change their minds about things. I love that, we have this principle at Amazon about our write a lot, leaders are write a lot, because they seek diverse perspectives and work to disconfirm their own beliefs. And I love it when people can get new information and be willing to say, you know what, maybe I want to do something different than what I thought I wanted to do 10 years ago. And I think as an industry, we all need to think about that as we're continually evolving as a society, as a community. Like when we get new information, how do we be willing to go back and look at some of the things we've done historically for a long time and be willing to say, you know what, it's okay to change it.
And being an ally is being open to be called forward. I mean, isn't that... being alive is wanting to grow and change and evolve with what new information and experience we gather. So I love what you just said.
One other piece of that, too, when we're talking about that, and I really do have to give a huge shout out to IMDb Pro. I mean, that Discover tool is incredible. Because, again, I'm a little person right away. I'm gonna bring people in to help me. I'm like, hey, you mind grabbing that for me? You're all of a sudden in my team, whether you want to be or not. So, but for a lot of people with disabilities, you don't know that they have a disability until they disclose that, okay? Even me, this is what I do, this is my passion, this is what I go to bed thinking about, creating these opportunities. Until I know what somebody's disability is, I don't know if it's an invisible disability. So having this tool and being able to have this on a platform that all the industry uses, all the casting directors, every actor that's trying to get their star meter up to that top, which... we all get excited when we jump a little bit. But, it is an amazing tool. And honestly, again, it's for people in the disability community, it is a journey similar to, as you talked about, to when you want to come forward and identify that you have a disability. But I always say to people, too, that it is important to put that stamp out and say, you have a disability. There is power in it. The industry is looking for you. It is no longer something that is going to make it hard for you to get a job or be looked at. The industry wants to include more people with disability because of the size of the population and the billions of dollars of spending power that we have.
Yes, and you do. Yes, and then if you add in family members and caregivers, it's like $1 trillion. So, no, literally, the market for it is huge. So, absolutely. Lupika, I love the 1497 project, and I want you to be able to talk more about it, but I love this where you're going in and really being very nuanced about the Southeast Asian community and how they're represented, and even maybe educating people. I think one of the things when the team was, researching your organization and looking at the communities that you serve and focus on, we were commenting on how a lot of people, Afghanistan is included, right? And a lot of people, because of colonization, because of religion, because of cultural things that have happened, lump it into the Middle East. Right, but it's really a part of Southeast Asia. So I want you to talk a little bit about the work that you're doing and why it's so important to call that forward and make sure people are educated about the nuances in your region.
Yeah, well, I'll tie it back to the self-identification convo we've been having. 1497 does not purport to have the definition of South Asia, and we do not purport to be experts at all. I'll just start there. We are using a definition of South Asia that a lot of other organizations use, and we also encourage folks to self-identify.
Yep.
There are plenty of Afghan folks who do not identify as South Asian, and that is fine. We still want to support them.
Yeah.
But for us, it's important to uplift South Asia when, Asia is already represented in all these other places. Asia is 50 countries.
Right.
And, if you add in the Pacific Islands and other areas, that's a lot of places.
Yeah, a lot of people.
With their own histories and their own cultures and their own stories. And we miss so much nuance when we try to make everything a monolith. And so our mission is to highlight this one portion of Asia without forgetting the ways that we are all connected.
Yes.
But to highlight and uplift the stories from this area. So why we include Afghanistan is because historically, though they were never technically colonized by outside Western forces, there was influence from Persians and from Mughals that changed the course of their history. And that same influence moved into the South Asian area, the Indian subcontinent, if you will. And there's a lot of connection between that region and the other areas of South Asia that we might typically think of. So part of our mission at 1497 is to educate, is to say that, I mean, our very name is the year before colonization began in the area that we now call South Asia, and to try to expand the West's definition of what South Asia is. It is so much bigger than India, which is often the first and only place sometimes people think of. Yeah. But we have 8 countries in our living definition, and we are constantly learning and unlearning and growing to be more open to the ways other people define it. And we also acknowledge that the definition of a country is, you know, who defined those borders? It was not the people. So we are constantly flexible in our work, and when we have a need for folks to identify, we try not to say, like, you must be this South Asian to ride this ride, but you tell us how you define yourself and come join our party is sort of the way we approach things.
Very inclusive. And I'm sitting here in my brain going, did I say 1492 or 1497? Hopefully I said 1497.
You did. You said 1497, yes.
Okay. Do you want to list the 8 countries so people know, like, who, the work that you're doing in the project?
Okay. Afghanistan, Bangladesh, Bhutan, India, Pakistan, Nepal, Sri Lanka, and the Maldives.
Wow.
That could be a pub quiz question
can
later.
Can I listen? Bhutan and the Maldives and Bangladesh. Can I self-identify? Because I mean, I love all. I'm just asking.
We
for a
joke
friend.
that we need to have a 1497 like founders retreat in the Maldives at some point.
Yes.
Just we got to find ourselves some Maldiv. Are there Maldivian filmmakers here? We would really love to connect with you.
There's a great.
We're trying to uplift you.
There's
We
a
don't
great
know where you
tax
are.
credit to shoot there.
Oh,
just saying.
Listen.
Yeah.
We're ready to uplift you.
And I'll moderate the panel.
There we go. Perfect.
I'm gonna find my way in here somehow. What are some of the things you're most proud of in terms of how you've been able to reclaim the narrative?
We like to say that at 1497 it is brown talent, not brown stories.
Ooh, say that one more time.
Yeah, brown talent, not brown stories.
Come on.
So we are here to support South Asian artists tell whatever story they want to tell in whatever way they want to tell it.
Okay.
So our primary program, the program we started with when we launched in 2020, is a features lab where we select 3 mentees from a large application pool. We put them through a very rigorous mentorship process. They get paired with 4 mentors to get feedback from multiple perspectives. And then they go off, they work on their scripts, then we give them a pitch day, so they have an opportunity to pitch those scripts to actual real people looking to produce or finance or invest in films. And what we have found over the 3 years we've run the lab is there is shock at the both caliber of talent in our community, which I'm just sort of like, yeah. And also the storytelling, because it's not necessarily what you would expect when you say, no, seriously, go write the story you want to write.
Make sure you stop by the house at the shop. Okay. Now listen, intersectionality isn't just about representation, it's also about the quality of the story. I'm doing a shameless plug for our new Amazon MGM movie, American Fiction. Anybody seen it?
Love it, love it.
Awesome. What I love about American Fiction is it's not just like a black story. It's a story of a family. It's a story of aging parents. It's a story of sibling dynamics. It's the story of self-discovery and all those things. And so I think that's, really what enhances the quality of the story, all the layers. And so I'm just curious, have you all watched anything, television or film, that you were really proud of that got it right? Nick, I'll start with you.
I mean, shameless plug. I got to talk about the Easter Seals Disability Film Challenge, films, because this is people with disabilities telling their own stories.
Yeah.
I think in general, from Spider-Man Across the Spider-Verse to all these other kind of projects, other projects that have been amazing. Special, which was a TV show on Netflix, and it's an amazing show. I mean, it was written, created by Ryan O'Connell, and starring him. So it's his story.
Nice.
So I think that really that's the next layer of him talking about his story, his disability, and talking about intersectionality, also being a part of the LGBTQ plus community.
Yep.
So I think when you're able to tell your story, you're able to throw that little magic charm in. And another shameless plug, any of you Maldives filmmakers, you want to cast me in that movie, I'm a good snorkeler. All right, I'm good. You got to talk to my wife. She's coming.
Alex, save me.
Oh, I can't. At GLAD, we are interested in LGBTQ stories that accelerate acceptance for our community. And each year, we get to celebrate some of the most outstanding LGBTQ stories we've seen. So this past week, we were able to announce our nominees for the 35th annual GLAD Media Awards. There are so many incredible stories from LGBTQ filmmakers and stories that we haven't seen before and that are pushing the narrative forward. So I encourage everyone to check those out. But I do want to also challenge for the future. I've seen some great stuff, including Bottoms. It's one of my favorite movies. Nominated for a GLAD Award as well. But on the stage of the Emmys this past week, when Sarah Kate Ellis, our president and CEO, was receiving the Governor's Award from the Emmy Awards on behalf for GLAD, she called in demand for trans stories. And that is because when the majority of the public believes they don't know someone who's trans, more people believe they've seen a ghost than met someone like me. It's hilarious and horrifying. That means that their mental template has been filled with falsehoods about who we are, what our lives look like. And so the call forward for the kinds of stories that I want to see are not centered on our gender. Talking about intersectionality, we are so much more than our genders and our experience of transitioning and gender, and particularly I want to see old trans people, because we have been around. Talk about white Western colonialism. Trans people have been around the world for all of history and throughout time. And it is because of that colonialism and because of that punishment, criminalization, erasure of our stories that people think we are a new phenomenon. We are not, but the stories that are going to really get it right are still to come.
But absolutely. Absolutely. But they can check out Disclosure and they can check out Bottoms, I heard too. Okay. All right. Lupika.
Oh, God, okay, now I'm changing my answer because I want more stories of joy. I want more stories of everyday life. I want to see South Asian characters doing things that we don't see them do. And so now my answer is, everybody, if you didn't see it last year, please go see Polite Society. Go see it. Nida Mansour has created an incredible, beautiful world about sisters, about family, with stunts, and there's fun action, and also there's some mythology, and then there's amazing costumes, and just, oh my gosh, it's beautiful. And such a celebration of friendship and sisterhood and joy, and more of that.
Love that, love that. Now, listen, I spent a lot of time on a plane. Shout out to Delta Airlines. But there is nothing more rewarding than getting on there, and one of my categories to choose from is to choose a reframe movie. I love that. So, tell me about some of the movies or television shows that you were really proud of that have gotten it right.
I love that.
Yeah.
Well, I was thinking about it listening to everyone's response, and there's a reframe stamp film that actually releases in theaters this weekend called Origin, directed by Ava DuVernay. And I had the privilege of seeing the film and a Q&A with Ava where she, talked a lot about how the film was put together. And one of the things she said that really stuck with me in terms of, the work that we do and what we want to see more of is, this is a movie about like a brilliant, like a genius black woman, right? And we have so many films about genius white men, right? Like this Oscar season, we have Oppenheimer. You know, we're so used to seeing that kind of trope. And there was something that was so like beautifully revolutionary about this work. And I think it was so bold and so ambitious, and not just like got the reframe stamp, but like over indexes in every category, you know, because that's been such a part of Ava's work, and, you know, championing talent of color, champion other black women behind the scenes. So we're so thrilled to be, you know, putting support behind that film, and, you know, really just want to see all the great things come for it, because it's also an example of something that was made outside of the traditional kind of studio financing system. And that's something that we want to celebrate, because it's not just about who you hire. It's about who's paying for it sometimes. Right. And when you have the freedom to build the dream team that you want to build, you know, sometimes you have great collaborators, you have amazing studio partners that see your vision, but sometimes you have to forge that path yourself. And then when you're in control of the dollars, you can really be in control of, you know, who's on your team. And so I thought that was a really beautiful example. And there's so many more, and I love that you shout out the airlines. We have a new collection on Delta launching March 1st for Women's History Month. That's going to spotlight films that earn the reframe stamp, so thrilled about that. But, you know, as audiences, you have such a power in, you know, putting your dollars, putting your eyeballs behind these films, and like really seeking out and supporting. It does still matter what you go see in opening weekend. Like that does matter. Those numbers matter. They matter to the powers that be. So, you know, there's a role that we all play, whether you're, you know, behind the scenes or you're in the audience, in terms of really moving the needle.
I love that. So how many of you, well, listen, if you haven't seen Origin, please go see it. It's about a brilliant black woman, but it's about a universal theme.
And the interconnectedness that I think we're all talking about.
Where it all roots from. Why do we see and harp on and find differences in our fellow humans, and what does it all stem from? So it's a great like anthropology movie, right? So I encourage everyone to see it. Who in my audience today is here from a studio or network? So you're not a filmmaker necessarily, but you're a studio or network person. Okay, a few of you, good. I just want to encourage your point around the fact that don't miss out on the good movies because you're so bent on a formula of who has to direct it, cast it, or work behind the scenes, because you could miss out on a good film like Origin.
That's right, and there's some amazing titles to speak again to intersectionality here at Sundance this year. The first film I saw of the festival was Layla, which is a queer Muslim non-binary narrative, Palestinian star, you know, incredible film. Can't say enough great things about that, and the filmmaker Amru, who I'm doing a panel with on this stage tomorrow at 2 p.m. shouting that out. But yeah, just like a treasure trove. When again you're open to understanding how we all grow through seeing the stories of different communities and their intersections. There's so much out there.
My Name is Polly Murray, a film with an older trans person. There you go.
Yeah. Ooh, can I shout out another film at the festival? Girls Will Be Girls. Shuchi Talati has created this brilliant narrative about female sexual awakening, and they really, really wanted to have women in leadership positions behind the camera, but they were shooting in India, and so they had a hard time finding women with that skill set. So they created a fellowship to train women to do those jobs, and then hired them to work on their film, and that is how you make change.
I love it. So, everyone who's in a relationship with a woman, you should go see the film so you understand we do have sexual awakenings. Okay, please help me thank my amazing panel.
Thank you, Latasha.
Sorry. Before we go, I got one special announcement, and he did such a good job holding it this year that I almost forgot about it. Please.
Well, first of all, thank you so much. Isn't she the best? I mean, Latasha is an amazing moderator, so we got to thank her. And I have one last plug. So each year, this is the 11th anniversary of the Disability Film Challenge. We have a different genre every year, and I've been sitting, waiting to give that genre here. Waiting. I'm like, I'm gonna say it now. Not yet. I'm gonna say it. So I'm gonna say it right now. This year, the genre, for the first time ever, is buddy comedy. Woo! So go to disabilityfilmchallenge.com.
Yes, thank you, Nick, for that.